Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you.
So Miguel has literally just arrived moments ago.
That's right.
Is that right?
Well, hours. I did get to enjoy the gym and the giant buffet in the hotel.
All right.
Upstairs.
I hope you got enough Red Bull to keep us going.
And Red Bull, too.
All right. So I want to just open a little bit by talking about your origin story and how you got started. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how WeWork got launched.
Yeah, we were, a couple of entrepreneurs doing other things in Brooklyn, in New York. Both Adam and I, my partner, moved to New York with the sort of typical story of chasing some big dream. His turned into a baby clothing company. He was actually designing baby clothes. He didn't have a baby, so I'm not sure exactly how he got into it. I was doing architectural design, and we ended up working in a building in Brooklyn that had a bunch of cool companies in it, but wasn't organized in any way, wasn't really supportive, aside from the cool old brick warehouse type of building, from a function and from really serving the businesses that were there. It just wasn't working very well. And so we saw, so many cool people around us that we thought we could support, and really WeWork was born just out of this, the typical entrepreneur's vision of seeing a problem and trying to solve it, and that was to look for all the ways we could support all these super cool businesses that were around us.
So you and Adam had a kind of a similar background in a way. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's weird. Adam grew up in a kibbutz in Israel. Not his whole life, but he spent time there as a kid. And I had never even heard of that until I met him and heard his background. I grew up amongst a collective of mothers who had chosen to have kids without fathers involved. And so, very shared responsibility for everything from, nightly dinner to getting kids off to school to, the holidays were all about this sort of chosen family more than the typical family structure. And so I think that we both grew up in environments where we depended on a lot of people outside of the normal familial structure, and we liked being surrounded by people all the time. And I think that's something that as entrepreneurs, it's easy to get isolated when you're doing something that is very small and outside of the structure of a larger company, and I think in some ways can be very lonely. And so I think part of our interest was not only in, how do we support people logistically and from a real estate perspective, but how do we surround ourselves with cool, awesome people, which is what we're, kind of came natural to us.
That's fascinating. So that sort of leads to my next question, which is that the co-working space idea, you didn't invent it. Obviously, there were people that were doing it before. But you brought this ethos that you both shared to inform a different kind of model, I guess.
Yeah, so I think there was a couple of things. Co-working existed, but it was primarily focused on tech startups and a lot on engineers and a lot on male engineers. Yeah. So, at the time, you would go into some of these co-working spaces and there are 40 or 50 or 100 people at the top end. And a lot of times, there are people with headphones on, sitting at a computer all day in a big open space, not dissimilar from this room. And for us, we were surrounded by businesses of all types. We call them creators now, but they're people who are doing something because they love it, because they're interested, they're passionate about it. And it could be anything from architectural design to filmmaking to legal and accounting services, whatever. It didn't really matter what you're doing as long as it's, you're trying to make an impact on the world. And it was that eclectic makeup of business types that we found to be so interesting to engage with. And that was way different than anything existed at the time. And we also didn't do a big open room like this. We also, from the very beginning, we did offer people some levels of privacy, inside of glass walls. Yeah. But it wasn't like, everyone's just in an open room. Because in real life, you have people who are on sales calls, and people on sales calls are annoying. So you don't want to sit next to someone all day when they're on the phone if you're trying to focus on something else. So we kind of gave a spectrum of opportunities of work space type to serve all those different business needs.
You can definitely see that in the center last night, where there are open spaces where people can mingle. There are spaces where individual companies and startups can be together and kind of have it be their space, and then there are these little nooks and crannies and crawl spaces and hideaways where people can do their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, one of the things you see just from even like a body language, people are so diverse, and especially now that people are working on phones and iPads, it's like people can be literally lying down on the job, and they're still working and being creative and thinking of big ideas. And I think that's one of the big changes that's happened in the last 8 to 10 years is you don't have to be at your desk in front of a computer to be working. And so what is this big array of opportunities that are supportive to all the different work types? And we're still trying to figure that out, in our design process.
I actually, when the first time that I visited the center here, I actually met someone who was lying down. She had hurt her back, and she had found a little sofa down on the first floor. And she said, I'm working, really, I'm working.
That's funny.
Tell us a little bit about your growth, because you have grown incredibly quickly. You're one of the hottest startup stories that there is.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we first started, we had an idea that there was something changing in terms of work, and we believed that it was a global shift. We thought that we were onto something that wasn't unique to New York or San Francisco, but really that people were taking a new interest in their future and taking control of their future, and through entrepreneurship, but not just in the typical tech, like I'm gonna raise money and become a billionaire, but more just in the I want to take control of my life and be engaged in my destiny. We felt like something was happening there, and we believed that it was global. We thought if it's happening here for us, it's probably happening in London and in Tel Aviv. And I don't, to be honest, know if we thought about the cities that we're going into now. We certainly had Shanghai on the map, but I don't, we didn't go that deep into the entire globe. But what we found is that there's so much similarity in these communities that we're building. You walk into a WeWork location in Shanghai, like I was in yesterday, feels so similar to Mexico City, feels similar to London, and the energy and the shared, interest in this growth. And so we're really excited. I mean, Singapore, we've got one location open. We're going to open a couple more here. We're also expanding in Southeast Asia. We're going to be in Bangkok and Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur and Manila. Those are really this year. So I mean, those are exciting.
Those are 4 Southeast Asian expansions within
the end of the year. That's for us, this is just our way of being. We're always pushing hard to grow really fast. We believe we're at a special time in a moment where the world is open to us. So we're just going to keep going.
That's really interesting. And as you mentioned the sort of commonalities of the centers in the different cities. Do you try to kind of design these facilities so that they are, in some ways, they cater to the individual cultures and the geographies? How do you make that?
It's interesting. People have asked us a lot. Countries, cities, people take pride in how they're unique, which makes sense, right? So when we first were going into London from New York, all the walls in our workspaces are glass. So when we were first going into London, there was all these architects and business people, real estate people who saw our designs, and they're like, there's not one person in London who will work in a glass office next to someone they don't know. Like London, you guys in the US, you're all open to each other, but here in London, we're all closed-minded. We'll never do that. Yeah. You won't find one person who will take this space. And of course, we had to, that scared us a little bit. We're like, whoa, everyone's saying it won't work. But we're like, we don't know anything else. This is what we do. We're going to try it. And of course, there was some level of concern by some people who came in. But once they engaged in it and felt the energy that you get from this more open environment, London became one of our fastest growing markets. And so I think there are small tweaks that we'll make, but a lot of it is the same. In Shanghai, for example, we've learned, we didn't know this in the past, that meetings are huge. Apparently, culturally, the value or the importance of the meeting is often judged by how many people are there. Yeah. So there's rows of seating, inside the conference rooms, which we've had to add because in the US, we study our meetings, and even in a large room, the average could be 2.6 people per meeting, right? Yeah. And so we're going to make the rooms much smaller typically. And then, we come to China and they need rooms that can fit 40 people. And that's just a big, so a lot of those tweaks are functional. And the good thing is that we have an iterative process. So because we do everything in-house, we do our design. We developed a technology platform where we manage all of the design information from our real estate and leasing side all the way through operations, end to end. It's all the same data. And so we're able to learn a lot from that process. And then we'll be measuring things like how do people use conference rooms, the distances that they'll travel to get to one, you know, how often do they use them, depend on the size of their company. There's all sorts of metrics which we've uncovered that help us, you know, run more efficiently. But of course, those things are different in each country and each locale, so we're always tweaking and changing and improving.
So I noticed in the Singapore Center, there's a kind of an effort to sort of make some nods to local culture and architecture and design style. It's got kind of in places a sort of shop house feel. It feels a little bit like a kampong in some other areas. How, though, do you make an effort to try to thread through a universal WeWork look or feel? Is there some signature design element that you try to make common to all sites?
You know, that's the cool thing is we hire local designers. We move usually some of our team members from other locations who are familiar with what we do, but then we also hire people locally. And we encourage them to connect and, you know, indulge in the local culture and be inspired by it. And we've never wanted to be in a place where we're just rolling out the same thing. You know, that's just, you know, I'm a designer by background, and I worked on a retail rollout, and literally after like 20 locations, I was like, I'm so bored with this. I have no inspiration because I'm just doing the same thing over and over. And so we've always wanted to figure out how do you make that process exciting. And one of those ways is to be inspired by the local culture and to, you know, draw from it. And that comes in many forms. You know, I think here, as in other countries, we've worked with local furniture providers, you know, light fixture designers, all kinds of things like that to pull in some of that flavor.
It's interesting. So you're trained as an architect, correct? Yeah.
I mean, you know, unofficially, I studied architecture.
I see.
But I haven't worked in it as a, you know, capital A architect, really.
So do you oversee all this stuff directly? I mean, you have an interesting title. In addition to being co-founder, you're the sort of chief culture officer. So what does that entail?
Well, I used to be chief creative officer because I thought that would give me like the purview over all the creative stuff in the company, and that was a cool, rather than being involved in like the business side, which to me I did a lot of in the early days, but I wanted to get away from. But over time, I realized that, you know, our most important asset, our most important part of who we are as a company are our team members, our people. And so I still love the design side, but I'm less directly involved. I mean, I'm sort of spiritually involved in it. Yeah. But from a culture perspective, we're working now very specifically and diligently on how do you build a culture that gets better every day, where, you know, you're always improving on the way that the company operates, on the relationships between people. And as we're growing and building teams, you know, all around the world, that's become more and more important. And we're actually building a platform that we think will be successful in I don't even like the word manage. I'm trying to find the right word, but build culture every day, make it better than it was in the past. And a lot of the reason for that, one is for our company and our over 4,000 team members, but because we're out in the world and we're held up as this example as like a cool company, other companies are coming to us and saying, hey, how do we get some of that good thing that you have? Yeah. And in order to help another company, you have to understand your own culture well enough to be able to figure out the ways it can be transferable. And that's something we're working on now. We have actual products, one called Powered by We, where we go into other companies' workspaces and help them operate it. But we're not just operating from a sort of whatever facilities perspective, we're operating it also from a culture perspective. So that's the new frontier for us.
So you were talking about sort of broadening out into other areas so that you're not just providing people with workspaces, but that you are also collaborating with them to, you know, bring this same kind of model to different aspects of their life, whether it's health and fitness and, you know, their workout routine, or whether it's even where they live. Right. Can you talk a little bit about some of that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we found that's super exciting is that people, when they are in the mindset of being open and connected to each other, that can, you know, layering on different experiences that people share helps build the community. And so one of the things that we love is health and wellness, and you know, when it sounds so basic, but it's like when two people who know each other in one context in business, now they change their clothes and go do a yoga class or a boxing class together. Right. All of a sudden, you know, they get to know each other in a different context, and they've got something to talk about that perhaps, you know, goes outside of the typical business context. So it's like, wow, you're really flexible.
Yeah.
It's like, that seems stupid, but like, that's something that we now share that I'm aware of about you, and then you might know about me that, I'm the exact opposite, and that, yoga is incredibly painful for me to attempt. So, but I think that's the thing, is that figuring out how to give people more opportunities to share, build multi-dimensional relationships. I think as a designer, that's a really important part of the role that we're playing, because it goes beyond, especially in workplace design, just trying to make a space that looks cool. If you're doing it right, you're actually in service of humanity. You're trying to help people both grow and evolve as humans, and also build meaningful relationships with other humans. And that's an awesome place to be as a designer, because companies are recognizing that that's important, and they're actually, I think, hiring people to make spaces that support those things.
Remarkable. One of the things that has struck me about your model as it has evolved is that you've started from focusing on freelancers and these sort of small startups, companies that are in their early stages, to now figuring out how you can actually offer a whole range of services to very large companies and help them to cut their costs. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what the value proposition might be for WeWork, for large employers? I mean, even you're talking with Fortune 500 companies about how you can help them to...
Fortune, like 10 companies. Yeah,
wow.
It's crazy. I mean, one of the things that, for us, I remember the first time I saw a big company using one of our spaces. I was walking down the hall, I looked, and there was a logo for Coke Zero on one of the doors. And it was a very small space, I think just for 2 or 4 people. And I was like, there was no one in there, so I couldn't ask them, what Coke Zero, are you just advertising on our wall, or is this, or you actually have people working here? And I talked to our community management team, and they said, yeah, these guys from Coke Zero wanted to be in a more inspiring environment. They have an office here in the city, but it's just not awesome for them. They're not happy to be there, and so they come here as sort of like, when they want to come and be excited about their work. And that was something that was illuminating for us, that even companies that have a lot of resources are not creating spaces that are supportive to their teams. And what we've seen is that even for some really large companies, it's hard to shift their internal culture. It's hard to create, if they've already become heavily bureaucratic, if the people running their workspaces are facilities managers, nothing against them, but their motivation is not to like make places that are the most exciting and amazing for human potential and for excitement and happiness walking into a space. And so that's become, for many companies, much easier to outsource and to say, hey, if you can give me a turnkey environment where my people are just going to walk in, especially companies that are trying to serve a younger, more innovative workforce, that can actually be quite an empowerment. So we've seen it happen a lot, where companies are coming in, they take a small space, 10, 20, 30 people, and that becomes one of the most desired spaces in that company's sort of portfolio of workspace, and then they want more and more and more. We have some companies that have 600, 700, 1,000 people in our buildings.
Well, we got time for one very quick question. Does anybody have one? No? All right, I'm going to ask you one 30-second question here. So sometimes you got these giant companies, you got these smaller companies. They have very different cultures. They're all into one space. Sometimes the cultures don't meld very well. I find sometimes even in my office, the person that wants to eat their lunch at the desk, and I'm not into that aroma as it's wafting over my cubicle. How do you regulate that stuff? Are you the umpire between sort of interculture and company disputes?
A little bit. I mean, I think I wouldn't say luckily. I think usually it's pretty friendly, because the environment that we create is one where when you come in, you have to be socially aware, and you're coming there because you're interested in this connection. But that said, I mean, I do get the emails. They rise up even to me of someone saying, wow, there's this dispute between cultural sort of expectations inside of the workplace. But I think those things are really positive. I mean, the good thing is for people to be addressing these things and being open and wanting to have a dialogue, and that's what we should all be interested in creating, rather than saying, just go back to your cubicle and don't talk to anyone.
Very good. Please join me in thanking Miguel McKelvey for coming all this way to speak to us here at Singapore. Thank you. Terrific. We're off this way, yeah.